Tonight's big stories. Justice Secretary Boying Remulla warns former President Rodrigo Duterte and Senator Bato de la Rosa from going to the countries where the International Criminal Court has undue influence.
President Marcos appoints Lieutenant General Romeo Browner as the Chief of Staff of the AFP, replacing General Andres Centino, who was named Presidential Advisor on the West Philippine Sea.
And former Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles has been suspended by the Supreme Court once again, this time for the use of inappropriate language.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Taking off from that ICC decision yesterday, may warning ngayon si Justice Secretary Boying Remulla for former President Rodrigo Duterte and former PNP Chief and now Senator Bato de la Rosa.
Kung kayo pupunta sa lugar na maaaring ang ICC, makialam. Kasi dito, hindi sila pwede makialam talaga rito. Sa ibang bansa, kung tingin natin ay may pagkaalangan, di mag-usap muna kami kung aalis sila, kung pupunta sila sa ibang bansa na maaaring magkaroon ng problema. Kasi ano yan they're citizens of the Republic who also need our protection. So we have to tell them.
Secretary Remulla also mentioned the stay away from the European countries where they could possibly have influence over.
Of course, the ICC has a lot of influence in Europe.
Yeah, but si Senator Bato has no US visa. So, saan na siya magbabakasyon ngayon? Hindi, but on a serious
Love the
note...
Philippines,
Yeah.
diba?
But on a serious note, I mean, you know, they both said, Senator Bato de la Rosa said he doesn't care. And then President Duterte, according to Harry Roque, cannot be bothered. Wala daw siyang pake. So, but if wala silang pake and Remulla gives this advice, it's a little bit kind of running contrary to each other, right?
We don't know at this point if Boying Remulla is allowed to speak on their behalf. There is that. Baka naman he's just looking
unsolicited advice lang.
He's looking out for them as well. Because recall that the ICC can issue warrants of arrest.
That's true.
Or summonses against former President Duterte and Bato de la Rosa and a few other people.
That's correct. Now that the Philippine government has repeatedly said that it will not cooperate in the investigation, Remulla assures Duterte and de la Rosa that the ICC can't really interfere here in the Philippines.
Right, but for now, the ICC has yet to release a list of individuals who are targeted in this investigation. But Duterte and de la Rosa seem to be obvious targets as chief architects of the bloody drug war. Now, aside from those two, news outlet Verifiles reported that Vice President Sara Duterte and Senator Bongo were also named in the documents submitted to the ICC. According to Verifiles, the probe is related to her supposed role in the war on drugs when she was still mayor of Davao City. The Vice President gave a simple no-comment remark in response to this report, while Senator Bongo said that the ICC has no business meddling in our internal affairs, saying that our courts remain fully functional. And so, what steps will the Justice Department be taking following the ICC's ruling? Let's bring in Marlene Alcaide for the answer. What do you have, Marlene?
Sean, Secretary Remulla said he will be speaking with Solicitor General Menardo Guevara regarding the matter. The Solgen has also earlier expressed dismay over the ICC's decision, saying that it undermines the Philippine sovereignty. Remulla also reiterated its warning to ICC investigators that they will be violating our laws should they enter the Philippines. For now, the Justice Secretary assures Filipinos that the government is continuing its own drug war investigations. He says if there will be witnesses, they will be provided protection, while they have also granted requests of families to have the victims' bodies re-autopsied. Sean?
Thanks for that, Marlene Alcaide.
In other news, over 100 military and uniformed personnel pledged their support for Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong's fight against corruption. In a manifesto, some 115 active and retired police and military personnel expressed unwavering support for Magalong's fight against corruption, which they described as brave and necessary. The police and military men said they are disheartened to learn that around 700 billion pesos in government funds are siphoned off through corrupt practices every year. citing a certain former senator. They note that corruption diverts valuable resources meant for essential services, infrastructure, and the improvement of living conditions of all Filipinos. At alam naman natin, sinasabi nga ni Benjamin Magalong na we've been so used to it. Like yung seeing yung may patong sa infrastructure projects, 10 to 25%. And
Not just that,
Not just
but
10 to
they're
25.
also, sila na yung contractor,
That's
sila pa yung
true. Supplier.
may kaibigan pa na
Exactly.
ganon.
May kickback pa.
May kickback
And
pa.
this is all him. This is all him saying it, not us.
And he actually filed a fourth graft complaint versus the head of Baguio City District Engineering, DPWH, over an 88 million bridge. He is taking a strong stance against this, saying kahit mag-isa lang siya, lalamanan ko yan.
Right, in our interview with him, he also said that a lot of generals and uniformed personnel are with him
Yes,
on this.
that's
And now
right.
we have a list with 150 names. We have 3 pages of those names who are joining this push for good governance by Mayor Magalong. But ang hinahanap ko dito, he said some lawmakers are also willing to join him in his cause, but their names are not yet here in the 150.
Pero
that were
sinasabi rin ng military na parang bakit kami magko-contribute part of our income to the pension fund when, this happens, when we
And
have
then
the
kayo,
funds.
ayaw nyo i-give up yung
Parang
pork
ramdam
barrel
natin
nyo.
yun sa tax natin,
And
right?
he
Every time we pay
also said
taxes.
they're willing to give up a portion of their pension fund. They're willing to sacrifice, essentially, right, to contribute to the pension fund.
And they're asking lawmakers to do the same from their pork barrel funds, which, according to Mayor Magalong, is still around even though it has been invalidated since 2013. He also said it was parked in some departments and naming, of course, the DPWH.
DPWH specifically, he said that's the favorite parking spot of these
Lawmakers.
the lawmakers for the pork barrel funds.
Right, moving on, but still on the military, we have Lieutenant General Romeo Browner being appointed as the next AFP Chief. Browner is currently the commanding general of the Philippine Army. He will replace General Andres Centino, who has been appointed as the presidential advisor on the West Philippine Sea. Centino was reappointed AFP Chief just this January, succeeding Lieutenant General Bartolome Bacaro. With the new appointments in place, Browner would be the 3rd AFP Chief of Staff under the Marcos administration.
Well, what else is there to know about the new AFP chief? Well, Lieutenant General Browner holds a highly esteemed military career spanning 34 years. He was a member of the PMA Makatao class of 1989, after which he went on to hold various military posts. Aside from his tenure as Philippine Army Chief, Browner also served as commander of the 4th Infantry Division, the unit responsible for counterinsurgency in northern Mindanao and Caraga. He also served as Deputy Commander of Joint Task Force Marawi and was a spokesperson during the Marawi siege. Aside from ground duties, Browner spoke against hazing and the culture of violence in the PMA. Well, up next, NEDA assures the public that the recently signed Maharlika law will not have any negative impact on the 2024 budget. The details when we return. You're watching the big story here on One News. The 2024 national budget will remain untouched, this NEDA assures, as the government starts to bankroll the Maharlika Investment Fund. NEDA Chief Arsenio Balisacan insists that only idle funds will be used to finance the MIF. He also guaranteed the public that the investment fund will not sink the Philippines into more debt. The proposed national budget for the next year is pegged at 5.7 trillion pesos, nearly 10% higher compared to this year's budget. Balisacan says the Maharlika Fund can be used to invest in any of the 194 infrastructure projects that NEDA identified earlier this year. Pension fund managers from Canada are also reportedly interested in investing in the MIF. Right now, NEDA says they're focused on getting the right people to run the Maharlika Investment Corporation so that funding can start next year.
Of course, we have to make quite a diligent search for the officers of the corporation who will be able to independently make decisions on those projects. We'll have to meet to define, develop our guidelines. We need to get this economy going because otherwise, may iwanan pa tayo.
Since we're talking about infrastructure and big-ticket projects, here's a big one today. NEDA has given the green light to privatize the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. So that means 170.6 billion ng yung budget na nandun sa ano na yon.
Yes, and it is a solicited
Pitch na yun,
bid.
sa bid, yeah.
Kung naalala natin yung dating bid ng consortium, that was unsolicited.
Correct.
This one is
Yeah.
solicited, Reg.
Which
Do
is-
us the honors of explaining
No,
the
but
difference.
the bottom line is they've effectively thrown out the proposal of the consortium, which is called MIAC, MIAC, Manila International Airport Consortium, which is the one that's made up by the country's, some of the
Top
biggest
tycoons,
conglomerates,
the seven
right?
tycoons, yeah.
Alliance Global,
Pero
Ayala,
kanina,
and so on and so forth.
tinanong si NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan kung magagamit ba yung Maharlika Investment Fund dito. Sabi niya, if the private sector is already there at kaya na nila, why put money there? Yun ang sabi niya about that.
It's
they
also-
want to,
it's-
yeah.
They can.
Bakit lalagay MIF daw?
And actually, I think yun nga yung issue ng MIF. People are looking for, ano ba talaga yung mga projects na gusto nyo i-fund, kaya nyo minamadali yung MIF. And I think that part of it is unclear. Like, ano ba talaga itong mga projects? Senator Mark Villar, who was one of the sponsors of this bill, he also said 350,000 jobs or something will be created, but we don't know where.
And again, we always talk about gunning for world-class travel experience, right? And the first portal being the NAIA. But what exactly is the plan to get to that? Let's bring in our reporter, Shyla Francisco, for the updates. Shyla, go ahead.
Reg, let's start with passenger capacity. The plan is to double the current capacity of 35 million to 62 million. That would entail a budget of around 170 billion pesos. That's why the government is hoping to start the bidding this year. The contract runs for 15 years and can be extended for another 10. You were talking about MIF a while ago, and yes, NEDA says they are studying on how it can help fund the rehabilitation of NAIA. Reg?
Thanks for that update, Shyla Francisco.
Twice the
So,
capacity.
yun na nga, that's what we were talking about, no? 170 billion is this solicited bid. The unsolicited bid was amounting to 270 billion.
Way more, almost double.
And we hear that one of the big differences as well is that mas malaki yung share to the government nitong solicited bids. The other bid, yung unsolicited,
Mas
the
malaki sa
consortium,
private
correct.
sector.
They were asking for more. So perhaps this is what it came down to.
Ito nga, so the other breakdowns of this proposal for privatization, of course, sinabi na ni Shyla, double the passenger capacity to 70 million, 57 billion pesos upfront concession payment, reportedly the largest upfront concession payment for a PPP in history, or at least in Philippine history.
Look, I dare say to most of our viewers, they don't really care who wins the bid, right?
They just want a better
Better
airport.
service.
We
walang
just want it
baha.
upgraded.
Magbaba
Correct.
mo pag umuulan, walang baha sa gutter.
As
Tsaka
per
yung
your
mga-
experience
yeah.
after coming back from Switzerland, di
Saka
ba?
pag upo mo, alam mo, pagdating mo, maghahantay ka, meron kang chair. Yun lang naman
Clean
minsan gusto mo.
toilets.
Clean toilet.
Thank
Tataas
you.
daw yung terminal fee daw to 800 pesos.
Okay lang siguro
Okay
yun
lang
for
yun.
But it's just
most
like
or-
taxes, right? You're happy to pay it if you can see
That's true,
where
yes.
it goes to,
As
right?
long as sulit, di ba? You get your money's worth.
Yeah. We do hope this fixes things. Finally.
Okay, may iba naman tayo, girls. The Supreme Court handed down a 6-month suspension to former Malacanang Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles for violating the Code of Professional Responsibility. Attorney Cruz Angeles was suspended for the use of intemperate language in a pleading that she and her co-counsel filed in court. The High Court issued a strong caution to both Cruz Angeles and respondent Ahmed Paglinawan, emphasizing that if they are to repeat the same action, they would face even harsher consequences. This is the second time that Cruz Angeles has been suspended by the Supreme Court. Back in 2016, she and her law partner were suspended for 3 years for negligence in their duty as legal counsels in an annulment case. The former Malacanang Press Secretary said they plan to file a motion for reconsideration on her suspension.
We're going to pause for another quick one, but right after that, curious to know what how the food stamp program works. Stay tuned for the details. Welcome back. You are still watching The Big Story here on One News.
So last night's Big Picture featured this electronic benefit transfer or EBT card that was given to individuals at the pilot run of the DSWD's food stamp program. Let's discuss that for a bit. Do you guys like this idea, this credit card type? Actually, para siyang prepaid loaded card.
Para
for
sigurado
payment.
na hindi siya ibebenta. Sa pagkain lang siya pwedeng gastusin.
Mas okay siya, di ba? I think this follows the model of the United States.
Yeah, anything that's, cashless, electronic, that's gotta be good. Yeah.
Tsaka walang risk na, your money will disappear or your neighbors will, pagdidiskitahan pa yung 3,000 pesos mo per month. So again, I think the only downside for me is as of now, konti pa lang, syempre, it's just the start.
It's a rollout. 50
Oo.
families pa lang
50
from Tondo
family,
yung una.
yes. And konti pa lang yung stores, I think, na pwede mo siyang gawin.
Although may partner supermarket si DSWD, so pwedeng doon kumuha. Kahapon nabanggit ko yung 1.5 for carbs, 900 for protein, tapos fats yung 600. So yung 3,000 every month yon.
Which is a nice way of breaking it
parang
down.
1 million food poor.
Yeah.
Dun sa listahan ng 3 yata. Pero ang tanong nga
Pero
doon,
by next year pa yung aabot siya sa
oo,
1 million.
ang tanong kasi kung kasama doon yung 4-piece. Kung nag-overlap nga ba yung
I
yung
believe,
mga names
yes,
na yun.
may overlap siya kasi yung poorest of the poor, yung 4-piece, tapos ito, food poor.
Well, we gotta clear that
Clarify
up.
that,
Clear that up.
with the SWD
Kaya din
Secretary.
may dry run at may roll out itong programa na to. Well, it would be nice to know the whole process of using the card. And with that, let's bring in mobile journalist Francis Orsho. Francis, ano ba yan?
Gretchen, based on our interview earlier today with some of the early food stamp beneficiaries, here's how the whole process works. From the 3,000 pesos allocated in every EBT card per month, a 1,500 peso voucher is allocated for carbohydrates including rice, noodles, bread, and corn. 900 pesos is for protein and fat foods such as pork, chicken, beef, fish, and eggs. While the remaining 600 pesos is for fruits and vegetables. For payment, the card will only be tapped on a device by the cashier at the Kadiwa store. The fingerprint also needs to be scanned to ensure that the card belongs to the individual. Once this is verified, the purchases are automatically paid for. In addition to Kadiwa stores where beneficiaries can shop, there are also accredited groceries and supermarkets included. The pilot run of the food stamp program will last until December this year. 3,000 families will be the first to participate in this pilot implementation. Gretchen?
Well, we do hope it works out. Of course, there's also the TESDA training component to it to give back to the food stamp program for employment. Meanwhile, in other news, mukhang masungit pa rin ang panahon, kaya magdala po ng payong at mag-ingat sa daan, Reg, when you're going to Baguio. That is still because of the low-pressure area east of Mindanao. The LPA was last spotted some 695 kilometers east of Hinatuan, Surigao del Sur. Pag-asa says this LPA will bring scattered rains across Marinduque, Romblon, the southern portion of Quezon, Bicol region, Visayas, and Caraga. It's expected to intensify into a tropical depression in the next days, after which it will be named Egay. Dito sa Metro Manila and other parts of the country, maulan din po. Yan ay dahil naman sa Intertropical Convergence Zone or ITCZ. Ito po yung convergence ng hangin mula sa northern and southern hemisphere. So in short, mag-ingat po tayo at maging maulan.
The MMDA, meanwhile, will crack down on motorcycle riders who stop under overpasses to avoid the rain or to wait out the rain. Acting MMDA Chair Romando Artes said staying under these structures during a heavy downpour is dangerous for both riders and other motorists. Those who get caught will be issued a ticket for obstruction, resulting in a fine of 500 pesos. The agency reminds riders that there are designated motorcycle lay-by areas along EDSA where one can seek shelter when it rains. Artes said they also plan to add more lay-by areas and set up tents in certain gas stations to provide additional shelter for riders.
Ang ulan naman po ay hindi kaagad bumabagsak. Normally, dumidilim muna po ang kaulapan, umaambon. Pwede naman pong tumabi at magsuot ng rain gear. Hindi rin naman po masama yon, pero wag naman po yung nakaharang sa gitna ng karsada.
But I mean, you gotta feel sorry for the riders.
That's true,
too,
that's
right?
true.
I mean, I understand it's a
mahirap
traffic
din.
hazard, pero when the heavens open, tas you're right in the middle of the
It's
highway,
also
where are you
hazardous
gonna
to
go?
them.
Yeah,
Diba?
exactly.
It's also dangerous. Pero
So what do
I
you
think
do?
just to clarify, he said if you just stop for a bit to put on a raincoat or a poncho, okay lang.
Pero
Pwede
pag
rin
malakas
tumabi lang.
kasi yung ulan,
Yun nga eh.
a raincoat won't do much for you if
Exactly.
you're on a bike, right?
It's just like,
you're,
But they also
you're still gonna
cited
get
it
drenched.
is also hazardous to
Yeah.
the other people passing by the road if they're
Yes.
stuck there.
Yes. So,
So
it's
maybe
one of
we'll
those-
see if their new suggestion and plan will work out to put more tents and lay-by stations. Now we have a little bit of time before we go, so it's time for a big picture tonight. Alright, normal to sa atin, pero baka sa ibang bansa, hindi. A photo of a woman pouring water on a man near the Colosseum in Rome as a heat wave swept across Italy. But it's not just in Italy, the rest of Europe and even Asia and America are experiencing these heat waves. The World Meteorological Organization has already warned of an increased risk of deaths linked to excessively high temperatures. And because of this, United States leaders have sought to reignite climate diplomacy with China. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry met with his Chinese counterpart, Xie Zhenhua, in Beijing, urging joint action to cut methane emissions and coal-fired power.
I remember on my last day in Switzerland, it was so hot, super hot, and pagpasok namin ng buildings, there was no aircon. And then they told me, hindi pala, bawal palang aircon
Yes.
doon sa Zurich.
Because of the emissions.
Because may emissions.
And then sabi ko, is it always like this? What do you do? Sabi niya, no, parang nag-increase daw yung number of days because they usually get that a few times in a year. Ngayon, sobrang dumami na
Because
raw.
may heat wave across
Oh,
Europe.
so what people do, they complain because the hotels themselves don't have air cons.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but we're talking about heat waves and
And rain.
LPAs
Oh,
in the
that's
same
right.
newscast.
So ito
which
na nga
is-
siguro yung extreme weather
Exactly.
events that
This is-
that's common under an
this
El
is-
Nino season.
This is pretty troubling because, you know, in other parts of the world, record-long heat waves. In our part of the world, sometimes too much rain, sometimes heat waves.
and sometimes too
What are you
little
gonna
rain.
do, right?
Well, it is very real.
Yeah, climate
Waiting to
change.
see,
here in
yes,
the
the results of this climate diplomacy and whether or not it gets us anywhere. But that's it for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.